I have stood beside Corporal Silas Marrow through 11 years of inspections, state visits, and the kind of silence that makes lesser men nervous. I had never once seen him answer an insult, not until the morning a man with 3 cameras and a borrowed rifle called him a museum piece to his face, on live television, inside the firing range beneath Aldenmuir's old barracks. The rehearsal had been my idea, in part. A trade delegation was arriving from across the strait in 4 days, the first of its kind in a decade, and the household had grown nervous about it in the particular way households grow nervous before anything historic: too many meetings, too many memos, too little sleep for the comptroller's office. Someone above my pay grade had decided the optics of a joint security drill would calm the visiting delegation's own people. So the household hired an outside firm to run it alongside our men, and the firm sent its founder in person, because the firm's founder never sent anyone else when there was a camera within 50 meters. He arrived an hour late, trailing 2 camera operators and a producer who kept saying the word content the way other men say money. Garrett Slate. I knew the name before he gave it, a private military contractor who had built half his client list off footage of other men's mistakes, clipped and captioned and circulating long after the mistakes themselves were forgotten. He shook my hand too hard, the way men do when they want you to remember the grip and not the conversation. He did not look at Marrow at all, not at first. He walked the length of the range instead, boots loud on the concrete, narrating for the lens the way a man narrates a museum he is touring for the first time and already finds dull: the rifles, the brass, the bearskins racked against the wall like trophies nobody had bothered to win. This, he said at last, stopping in front of Marrow, is what passes for security around here. He turned to the camera without breaking stride. Tunic. Bearskin. Brass buttons. Tell me, Sergeant, when's the last time this man fired anything heavier than a salute? Marrow did not move. He rarely did. His eyes stayed forward, fixed on the middle distance the way they always were on post, as if the insult had been addressed to the wall behind him rather than to the men standing in front of it. He's range qualified, I said. Same as every man in the regiment. Qualified. Slate laughed, short and easy, the laugh of a man who has never once doubted he was the most capable person in any room he entered. I've trained Tier 1 operators who couldn't hit a barn with these decorative carbines you hand them. No offense. It's a uniform built for parades, not for work. He reached out and flicked a gloved finger against the brass on Marrow's chest, light enough to call it nothing if anyone objected. Bet you've never had to actually use one of these. I felt my jaw tighten. Marrow's did not. 2 of the younger guardsmen had drifted toward the doorway to watch, the way young men always drift toward the sound of someone testing a thing they've been taught to respect, and one of Slate's operators swung a camera onto their faces instead of his, hunting for a reaction he could cut against Marrow's stillness later. He would not get one. The boys had been trained by the same men Slate was mocking, and they knew better than to give anyone a face worth keeping. Slate circled him once, slow, the way a man circles a piece of furniture he's deciding whether to buy. Tell you what, he said, turning back to the lens with the easy confidence of someone who has rehearsed this exact moment in his head a dozen times. Live fire contest. 5 rounds, 200 meters, moving target. Me against the museum piece here. We'll see what 1100 mornings of standing still actually buys a man. It was theater. It was meant to be theater, 5 minutes of staged humiliation, cut down for a highlight reel, the kind of footage that gets a private firm 100 new client calls by Friday. The household's protocol officer, a careful man named Aldrich Vesper who had crossed the floor at the sound of raised voices, opened his mouth to object on the grounds of decorum, of liability, of the dozen reasons a man in his position is paid to think of first. Marrow spoke before he could. I accept. It was the first thing he had said since the cameras arrived. Slate grinned, delighted, the way a man grins when his trap closes exactly the way he planned it. He did not know, none of them knew, not even Vesper, that Marrow had not spoken 11 words to me, his own training officer, about anything that happened to him before he transferred into ceremonial duty 5 years prior. I had read his personnel file once, briefly, before it was sealed at his own written request, a request the regiment had granted without question, because some men's silence is a kind of rank in itself, and you learn not to ask twice. I remembered, too, a smaller thing from years back, a routine wind call exercise where every other transfer in his intake had guessed and Marrow alone had simply known, called the drift to the half knot without lifting his eyes from the line. I had thought it strange at the time. I had not thought it my business. They set the targets at 200 meters, human silhouette plates rigged on a sliding rail, moving at a pace built to punish hesitation. Slate went first, because Slate always went first, in everything. He was good. I will give him that much. 3 out of 5 plates rang true on the first pass, his form clean, his confidence climbing with every hit, narrating each shot for the lens in the practiced cadence of a man who has watched his own highlight reels more than once. Then Marrow stepped to the line. He did not adjust his bearskin. He did not roll his shoulders or check his stance the way Slate had, twice, for the benefit of the camera. He simply raised the rifle the household had handed him that morning, a standard ceremonial carbine, nothing modified, nothing tuned for the occasion, and put 5 rounds through 5 plates before the echo of the first shot had finished crossing the range. The room went quiet in the particular way a room goes quiet when something has happened that nobody present is prepared to explain. Slate's smile did not leave his face. It just stopped reaching his eyes. "Beginner's luck reads well on camera," he said, already reloading. "Let's run it again. Wind's picking up out there. We'll see how the museum piece handles a real variable." They ran it again. And again. A gust came through on the 4th pass strong enough to tip the flag at the far berm sideways, and for one held breath I thought even Marrow might miss, but the rifle only paused half a second longer at his shoulder, reading something the rest of us couldn't, before all 5 plates rang anyway. Each round after that, Slate's hits thinned, 4, then 3, then 2, his form fraying as he tried harder, talked louder, glanced more often at the men beside him who had not once raised his voice or, as far as I could tell, his pulse. Each round, Marrow's did not thin at all. 5 plates, 5 rounds, every time, the rifle coming up and down with the same flat patience he used to lift it for a state arrival, as though 200 meters and a moving target and a rising wind were no more demanding than holding still in the rain on a forecourt nobody was watching. By the 4th round, Slate had stopped narrating for the cameras. By the 5th, he had stopped reloading altogether, and simply stood there, staring down the range at 5 plates ringing in unison, the wind he'd warned about doing nothing at all to the men who was supposedly only built for parades. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" Slate said. It did not land as a compliment. It landed the way a man asks a question he is already afraid of the answer to. Marrow lowered the rifle. He still had not looked at Slate directly, not once, through any of it. "Here," he said. "Same as every man in the regiment." It might have ended there, a quiet, private humiliation, the kind that dies in the room it happens in and never travels further than the men who witnessed it. But Vesper had not been idle while the contest ran. Midway through the 2nd round he had slipped out to the duty office and made a call to the one desk in the household authorized to unseal a guardsman's file without his consent, the comptroller's, on grounds of operational necessity, given that a contracted firm had just staged a live-fire challenge against one of our own on camera, with a foreign delegation's own security liaison standing at the back of the room taking it all in. He came back with a woman I had never once seen on that range, Major Ines Aldermeyer, gray at the temples, a single campaign clasp on her dress tunic that told you everything about her service before she had said a word. She walked straight past Slate, straight past the cameras still rolling, and stopped in front of Marrow. She reached up, the only person present who could have, by rank and by right, and unclasped the top button of his tunic collar, revealing a small enameled badge pinned beneath it, out of sight of any uniform inspection that did not already know exactly where to look. "Long reconnaissance and precision cadre," she said, reading it aloud for the cameras that had come to film someone else's humiliation entirely. "Top of the course, 8 years ago. I signed the citation myself." She turned, finally, to Slate, and her voice did not rise at all. "I also remember the men who washed out of that same course in week 3. Different name on the file. Same posture, I'd wager, when he doesn't get his way. I have never, in 11 years on this regiment, seen a room change temperature so quickly without anyone touching a thermostat." The delegation's liaison, a quiet man who had said nothing the entire morning, set down the coffee he'd been holding and simply watched, and later that week he would tell Vesper, through an interpreter, that his own government's honor guard trained the same way, in silence, on the theory that a man who explains his competence has already started to doubt it. It was, he said, the only part of the whole rehearsal he intended to mention in his report. Slate's producer, to his credit, kept the cameras rolling. He told me later, months later, over a drink he insisted on buying, that he had simply forgotten to call cut, the way you forget to look away from a collision you are too startled to have predicted. The footage aired 2 days afterward anyway, not as the humiliation reel Slate Tactical had planned and paid a crew to capture, but as the lead segment on 3 separate news programs. A private contractor, hired to help protect a visiting foreign delegation, outshot and outranked on his own camera by the ceremonial guard he had mocked as decoration. Slate Tactical lost the household contract within the week. I do not know what became of the firm after that, and I never once asked Mero whether he cared either way. He did not mention any of it again. Not the major, not the badge, not the footage that strangers on 3 continents had by then watched more times than I could bring myself to count. The very next morning he was back on his post at the eastern colonnade, bearskin straight, white gloves immaculate, eyes forward, exactly as he had been the morning before that, and the morning before that, for 5 years running, as if the whole affair had happened to some other man wearing his uniform. I asked him once, much later, off duty, why he had never told anyone why a man could carry a citation like that, sealed and silent for half a decade, and let himself be called a museum piece in front of a camera rather than simply say so and end it before it started. Because the badge isn't what makes the aim true, he said. The standing still is. I have thought about that answer more than I have thought about almost anything else a man has told me in this uniform. 1100 mornings of standing still had bought him exactly nothing. By Slate's accounting, no rank flashed, no name made, no client calls on a Friday. By mine, it had bought him the only kind of respect that does not evaporate the moment the cameras stop rolling, the kind a man earns by never once needing them in the first place, and the kind, I have come to believe, that no amount of footage was ever going to take from him. I still walk past that range some mornings on my own rounds, long after the rehearsal and the broadcast and the new contract the household signed with a quieter firm. The targets are gone, the rail dismantled for storage. What I remember is not the 5 plates ringing in unison, though I expect I'll remember that too, for as long as I keep this post. What I remember is a man who could have ended the whole thing with 11 words and chose, instead, to let his aim speak them for him.